Thank you all. Welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Audrey Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Arctic Research Consortium of the US, and otherwise known as ARCUS. I'm sure most of you know us by that name. We know this gathering, which is the final ARCUS community call, carries deep feeling for many of you. I know it does for me. Um, and so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join and for being here as part of our community today. The purpose of this call is fourfold. First, to share clear and transparent background on the board's decision to sunset ARCUS. Second, to report on the concrete steps we're taking now to wrap up operations and preserve the work that ARCUS has done over the decades that we've been in existence. Third, to express gratitude to the many people and organizations that have sustained ARCUS since 1988 when we were first incorporated. And fourth, to open space and share within our community reflections, stories of ARCUS, and consider any possible next steps and volunteer-led ideas for what happens next. I'll begin just with a brief look back at ARCUS history and impact, and then move into a bit of an explanation of how the decision to sunset was reached, because we've heard from a lot of folks about that. How did we get to that point? We'll update you on specific transition information, what we're continuing, what's being archived, where records will be in case you want to follow up with anything. And then we'll read a statement that we've received from the National Science Foundation, which is our primary funding organization. And after that, we'll open the floor up to this community for reflections, ideas, any specific next steps, and if you want to sign up to be a part of whatever follow-on activity the community is interested in. So just a few logistics. We are recording this meeting. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. We'll post the recording down the road. And if you'd like to speak during the community reflections part, which will be the very last part of the meeting, please use the raise hand function and we'll call on you to speak. We'd really like to encourage people to actually verbally share rather than just share in the chat. But if you do want to put something in the chat, we invite you to do that at any point throughout the meeting. We'll probably hold, unless it's relevant to what I'm discussing in a moment, reflections and ideas and things like that will hold till that time at the end of the meeting. Next slide. And I actually can't see the slides. Do you want me to share those, Brit? Hold on one sec. I've just got just a few slides that kind of help shape this next discussion about history and sunsetting. Maybe I need to make you the host. Does that help, Britt? There we go. Okay, great. Can everybody see slides now? Hopefully. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so continuing on, I wanted to just reflect a bit on the legacy that ARCUS has built over the last 35 years as a convener, a connector, a catalyst for Arctic research. Starting in the late 1980s, ARCUS focused on being a link between the Arctic research community's needs and available federal funding for Arctic science. So that was our initial purpose, was just to create this, this kind of direct link for Arctic specific science and funding for that science within the federal government. So this led to the creation of NSF's Arctic System Science, or ARCS program, which many of you are familiar with, in 1991, and eventually a series of cooperative agreements from NSF to ARCUS to provide additional opportunities for collaborative Arctic research. Through the years, ARCUS has supported a number of initiatives to help bridge Arctic research across organizations, disciplines, geographies, sectors, knowledge systems, and cultures. And we have also helped connect the U.S. Arctic research community to the global Arctic research community through our support of programs like the International Polar Year, national and international science conferences, and a member framework that includes both U.S. and international institutions that either do or have a vested interest in Arctic research. So that history, of course, makes today's conversation all the more difficult. And I want to move on to the next slide and just talk a little bit about where we are now. So ARCUS has had this long and storied history in building a community and facilitating Arctic research. And really, I think maybe the question that I've heard from many of you is there is so much passion and dedication and impact between ARCUS. Many of you are probably wondering, why now? Why is an organization with this kind of impact choosing to sunset? And so we wanted to be open and transparent about the factors that led to this decision, the funding challenges, the organizational choices, and the careful deliberations by our board and our membership that brought us to this point. From the outset, the board set a simple principle. We'll act responsibly to our staff, to our members, and to the legacy of ARCUS. So over the past 2 years, as we have entered this phase of more challenges to our funding situation, we've worked to find ways to sustain the organization. We've reduced staffing levels from 13 to 8 to now just 3 staff. We've shifted to a fully virtual office. We've pursued alternate funding models, and we've competed for new funding in collaboration with our members. And I just want to point out that a key structural reality is that for the long term, ARCUS operations have relied heavily on cooperative agreements with the National Science Foundation. And in 2023, NSF released a Dear Colleague letter stating the expectation for a new Arctic Community Hub RFP and encouraged ARCUS to apply for that. And this RFP was delayed a number of times. And in that time period, we received supplemental funding for our current cooperative agreement, which was up for renewal in 2022. So we existed under these short-term supplemental awards. We sought to diversify our revenue. We looked at alternate funding strategies, but ultimately, it's really difficult to replace a large cooperative agreement with NSF in a short period of time. So while we did our best, we ultimately couldn't replace that steady cooperative agreement funding level that underpinned ARCUS for most of its history. And so that's what we've been up against. And at the same time, NSF's own priorities had been shifting. Resources were redirected during and after the pandemic and toward alternative coordination structures within the Arctic community, like IARPC, navigating the new Arctic Community Office, and others, which is wonderful. It's great to see all these new players in the community, and they're all providing such wonderful work. But we also had a lot of leadership transitions at NSF, which reduced continuity in our long relationship, ARCUS' long relationship with NSF. And so this constricted the realistic funding pathways for ARCUS at a time when there was already restriction in place in terms of federal funding. And then the final turning point for ARCUS, I think, was this past spring. I probably don't need to tell this group what has happened in federal science funding since January 2025. But in practical terms, it resulted in that anticipated Community Hub RFP being archived by NSF. So that removed the primary chance for ARCUS to compete for a multi-year funding at scale. And the board, therefore, was faced with 2 pretty sobering options. Continue ARCUS as a volunteer-only entity with essentially no professional staff capacity, or dissolve the organization while staff could manage an orderly transition that protected our programs and archives, our data, and our legacy, um, or, in this volunteer capacity, try to figure out what comes next. And so after a lot of deliberation and consultation, both internally and with our members, the board recommended dissolution, and we had a membership vote in July to comply with our bylaws that supported that resolution, the recommendation to sunset. So this is all to ensure you, our community, that this decision to sunset ARCUS was not rash in any way. It was responsive to a number of things happening throughout the funding streams and throughout the federal government and the Arctic research community landscape writ large that has been going on for a number of years, but certainly came to a head in this last 6 months. So the board's guiding principle to protect the community and ARCUS legacy, to avoid a chaotic end that would risk losing archives, program continuity, and staff support to transfer records. That guiding principle was upheld, I think, in this transition. And we feel really good about leaving ARCUS in a transparent and an organized fashion. We chose that careful, responsible transition. So even though I think I speak on behalf of all of the board and staff that were heartbroken to take this step, we think it's the most responsible path forward, given the structural realities. And that's not to say that there's not something that could be done going forward, and we'll talk about that certainly at the end of this meeting. But the ARCUS that we know and love, what has been ARCUS for the last 35 years, doesn't have a viable path forward at this time. And so that's what we're choosing to sunset. Okay, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Brit Myers, our Strategic Engagement Director, for a little bit of a discussion about what we're doing with records and other ARCUS legacy products.
Thanks, Audrey. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing to prepare for the sunset. And the first step was developing a dissolution plan, which staff reviewed with the board. A key focus of that plan was making sure that where possible, ARCUS's history, resources, and community connections remained available once ARCUS sunset. So preserve history. One of our top priorities has been archiving publications, workshop reports, and program materials. We're creating a Zenodo community to hold ARCUS publications, reports, those documents. At the same time, we're also working with the Internet Archive to capture the ARCUS website, the Polar Media Archive, and Polar Trek pages. Once this work is complete, final links to these resources will be posted to the current ARCUS website at www.arcus.org. And this main site will also remain online. We're anticipating for the next year or so. So you will still be able to access things through that regular URL. Because ARCUS has also been working to transition to a fully virtual office over the past couple of years, much of the physical side of our archival process is already done. We completed the move out of the ARCUS space in Fairbanks, and as that was happening, we were digitizing documents. So our main focus now is really just on organizing and preparing those digital files so they can be preserved in the archives. Another piece of what we're doing is looking for ways to help our community continue to communicate and connect with one another after the sunset. And one action we've been taking is looking at ways to sustain Connect the Arctic, the online community hub at www.connectthearctic.com. So many of you have probably received ARCUS newsletters and Arctic info emails or relied on access to our calendar space on the website. So while ARCUS staff will no longer be moderating or generating that content, we're hoping that Connect the Arctic will still be a resource to you, at least for now, to continue exchanging those kinds of communications and news. So in Connect the Arctic, you can directly post your own news items, announcements, and events. And this hub is hosted on the Mighty Networks platform. We have a 2026 subscription in place, so it will remain online for at least the next 12 months. And we're actively looking for a few co-hosts who would be willing to help maintain this resource beyond that period. So for those of you whose organizations have supported ARCUS through dues, we invite you to consider maybe contributing, getting together and pooling a small donation so that this platform could potentially remain available to the community beyond that 12-month period. We do want to acknowledge that there are other online spaces like ARIARPIC collaborations, and we do not want to detract from that platform in any way, but Connect the Arctic does offer a slightly different kind of space. It's a little bit more flexible and could allow users to create different kinds of subgroups, and because it's not a federal platform, it might be valuable for other reasons, considering the current political context. Right now, we have about over 600 members on Connect the Arctic, and we'll be sending a communication out to our email subscribers, which is a much bigger group of about 11,000 individuals, letting them know that this resource will still be available to them now that Arctic Info is going away. So that hub is meant to be intentionally broad with an interdisciplinary audience that crosses research, education, community, and policy. ARCUS has had a long standing relationship with the polar education community, and we anticipate this will be one of the groups that will continue to engage in this space. And then as far as program transitions go, we've been looking at ways to enable a few of our programs to continue, and we're very grateful that two of the programs that ARCUS has supported for a long time still have some strong champions in the community. The Sea Ice Prediction Network will continue under its own governance, and we are in the process of moving all of its online materials over to a new website at seaiceprediction.org. And then for the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook, I'd like to invite Lisa Sheffield-Guy from the Alaska Ocean Observing System to share a little bit about what's happening with that program. So Lisa, let me elevate you to a co-host real quick, and we'll get you. I think you should now be able to switch on your mic and talk to us directly. Welcome.
Oh, and I could admit people in the waiting room too. I'm so powerful. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I am a former ARCUS staff member. I was with ARCUS for about 10 years. And while I was there, I got to work on many amazing programs like the Arctic Indigenous Scholars Program, the Early Career Conference Funding Award, and lots of things I feel very nostalgic for. And I'm fortunate to still be working on the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook. And I will drop a few links in the chat after I'm done talking. But Saiwo or Siwu or Saiwu, there's many ways to pronounce Saiwo, all are correct, began in 2010, so a little over 15 years now. And it is a springtime weekly outlook for Bering Strait coastal communities. And it's a network or partnership between the Weather Service, ARCUS, sea ice scientists, now the Alaska Ocean Observing System, and most importantly, hunters or local observers in 7 Bering Strait communities. And so weekly, we'll put out these forecasts of sea ice and weather conditions and what game hunters are seeing, areas of dangerous ice, things like that. And so it's this really successful collaborative model that's been wonderful to be a part of and watch grow. And it was started in 2010 by Haya Weiken and Vera Metcalf and Igor Krupnik and partners at NOAA, and kind of building on programs like SIZONet and SIKU at the time, but really focused on the Bering Strait region. And it was part of the study of environmental Arctic change. And then ARCUS carried on with it. And so was really this great home for SIWO with support from NSF through 2024. And we had been partnering with ARCUS at that time. They were contributing animations, like weekly sea ice animations, and they provided handheld weather meters to observers and were already really involved as partners. But they came in with rescue funding in 2025 and are now providing a home for the outlook going forward. And I do want to mention too, in 2022, we received a grant from Alaska Sea Grant with partners at University of Alaska Fairbanks to do an evaluation of the outlook. And that really advanced everything forward and helped us steer the program into kind of a new Bering Sea, new needs, like better internet access, really kind of revolutionized what we can do with the program. So going forward, you know, we're still kind of transitioning into this new home, but I'm just really grateful to ARCUS for, you know, all the SIWO funding for all these years. And I'm an ARCUS employee now, so I've been able to kind of just continue with the program. But our Facebook page is still active. And what we're working on now is we have this wonderful SIWO archive on the ARCUS webpage. And so we're strengthening our partnerships with other programs like ALOCA and AOK to try to combine archives so that everything is searchable and together, and that we can network our observers together more. And so we're looking forward to that in the future, and, you know, to keep growing and leaning more on our partners. But I'll drop a few links in the chat.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
In addition to providing an overview of the dissolution activities, we also wanted to take some time to acknowledge the many organizations and people who have made ARCUS's work possible over the years. And first and foremost, a very big thank you goes to the National Science Foundation's Office of Polar Programs, all the program officers, directors, past and present, who have collaborated in the work that of the ARCUS Cooperative Agreement with us. And we have received a brief statement of appreciation from NSF that I'm adding to the chat right now. And we just wanted to take a moment to read it aloud. So this statement says, "Dear Dr. Taylor, the Office of Polar Programs of the U.S. National Science Foundation acknowledges the Arctic Research Consortium of the U.S. for their dedicated efforts over the past 37 years in facilitating effective cross-boundary Arctic knowledge, research, communication, and education in the U.S. and with partners across the globe. NSF support began in 1988, and since 1994, 6 cooperative agreements totaling more than $45 million have allowed ARCUS to provide research community support, early career development and professional networking opportunities, collaborations with Indigenous communities and knowledge systems, including the design and implementation of an Indigenous Scholars Program, communications and outreach activities, and support for the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee and other important educational and research initiatives, including, but not limited to, the Study for Environmental Arctic Change, the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook, the Sea Ice Prediction Network, Polar Trek, and the Navigating the New Arctic Big Idea. NSF recognizes and thanks ARCUS for its strong partnership and support in advancing research coordination across the Arctic." And this statement really reflects the acknowledgement of all the work that ARCUS staff, board, program participants, and collaborators have done together over the years. So we just really wanted to share that and emphasize that this is an expression of gratitude that belongs to all of you. And then in addition to thanking NSF, we also want to express our heartfelt thanks to the many organizations that have been part of the ARCUS Consortium over the years. We currently have 29 institutional members, and these organizations and the representatives that have worked with us have all been key allies and collaborators in the work we do. So thank you to all of you. And then personally, I also want to take time to thank the many volunteers who have responded to our calls for committee members and other forms of engagement. So as the engagement director here at ARCUS, getting to work with all of those individuals on these collaborative activities has truly been the highlight of my own work over the past decade. And so I so appreciate all of you for your time, energy, and dedication. Thank you. And then Audrey, I'll hand it back to you. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, Audrey, I think you're muted. Can you unmute? There you go.
Great. Thank you. It said that I couldn't unmute myself. Okay. Thank you, Britt, for your careful review of what we're doing to effect an orderly transition. And I want to continue the trend of saying thank you to our community, as that's part of why we have everyone here today, is just to be able to recognize this vast number of folks that participated in ARCUS programs over the years and have worked with us in varying capacity. So first off, I want to thank our board leadership for working through the challenges of the last year with us. It's been a tough year, tough couple of years, in fact, and we're grateful for those of you who have stuck it out to the very end and those of you that have been willing to jump in at the final hour to ensure that we had a full board contingent to see us through the dissolution process. Rather than changing the bylaws at the last minute, we've had a few folks that stepped on just to see us through to the end. And so I really appreciate all of you. I appreciate the board's vision, guidance, and steady support, and it means a lot. To our institutional members, as Britt already mentioned, thank you for your engagement, your participation, and support through the years. To our past executive directors and leaders, Chris Shepard, Laura McCauley, Wendy Warnick, Susan Fox, Robert Rich, and Helen Wiggins, thank you for your dedication and leadership. Your contributions have created a legacy that will continue far beyond this formal organization. To our staff, past and present, now there's too many of you to name individually, but you all poured creativity and energy into programs large and small, into ARCUS efforts that we dreamed up, that we only envisioned were possible, and you made them a reality. Thank you. I'm grateful in particular for those of you that stayed with ARCUS through this last year, which has been challenging to say the least. And I think many of you would probably still be with ARCUS if it weren't for the major downsizing that we did this past spring in an attempt to weather the storm. Well, I appreciate and miss you all. And in particular, I want to recognize Lynn Murphy, our current Director of Finances and Human Resources, who came aboard during extreme upheaval in this last year and has been willing to stay through to the very end. She's a remarkable human being, and I so appreciate her competence and humor. And I also want to express my extreme gratitude for Brit, who our Director of Strategic Engagement, but she's also been a PI on our latest NSF cooperative agreement, and she's done a remarkable job handling all of those responsibilities. She's been our community builder and pillar of outreach for many years, and also a voice of reason in this critical last stage. So I really appreciate you, Brit. And all of us on the board and staff at ARCUS want to thank all of you for joining us today and for being a part of this Arctic research community and the ARCUS community. We really, really encourage all of you to stay connected, support the volunteer-led initiatives that might emerge as we go forward, but most importantly, continue to foster the networks and the partnerships and the spirit of collegiality and collaboration rather than competition that ARCUS has helped build and that we've tried to foster. We are a community, and we can stay a community if we just reach out, help each other, find opportunities to connect, to collaborate, to work together across those boundaries that ARCUS spent its entire existence trying to break down. So I really hope if we take nothing forward, we take that spirit of cooperation and collaboration forward into the future. So thank you all for joining us today, for being part of that research community, part of the ARCUS community. And please stay in touch, stay connected, support whatever happens next. And remember we're all in this together. Well, thank you all for being here and for being a part of it. And I think what we want to do now is create some space for community reflections and for exploring some of the ideas that have already been proposed to carry ARCUS legacy forward. So I want to be clear that the 501c3 organization is sunsetting. We've already started that process. So we are not going to come back from that at this stage. However, I think there's lots of opportunity for all of you in the community to spearhead some continued ARCUS type events or gatherings or community building activities. And so a few of those that we've heard include organizing some kind of a gathering at AGU this December. ARCUS has traditionally hosted community meeting rooms for our community at AGU. We obviously won't be doing that this year because there will no longer be staff. But it could still be possible for a number of folks in our community, especially if you're going to be at AGU already, to gather there and do some kind of ARCUS farewell or ARCUS gathering, or who knows, it could take a lot of different forms. Another thing that's come up, which could be part of that activity, would be writing a comprehensive overview of ARCUS history and impact, just to have a record of what ARCUS did, what it was, what the attempt was to create a collaborative organization, a community organization that supported Arctic researchers, and maybe even publishing that as some kind of peer-reviewed article, like in EOS or something like that. So the staff think these are wonderful suggestions, not something we can affect right at the moment, just because the process of sunsetting is taking quite a bit of energy and time, and also because we won't be employed anymore after September 30th. So these efforts would need some kind of volunteer leadership. So I wanted to put that out before we get into this community reflection space, not to take away from any reflections that people might have, but just to kind of set the stage for any kind of ideas or volunteer leadership that might emerge. So we invite anybody who's interested in anything like that to step forward, share ideas, discuss next steps. Please don't let our lack of creativity in this moment of sunset stop you from thinking big and broad and bold. So this next part of the meeting will be for all of you to both share any reflections that you have, but also share any ideas for what could come next. I do want to share that I think we'll steer clear of, or try to steer clear of problem solving what could have helped ARCUS, because we're past that point. What we'd really like to do is honor what has been built, what all of you built, recognizing what it has meant, and then planting any seeds for what could come next. So I think we'll turn it back over to Brit to just share a bit about how this will work.
Yeah, so I already see some hands raised, which is exactly what we love to see. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. We'll call on you. But please try and keep comments a bit concise so that multiple voices can be heard today. So, and then I think we actually have a couple very special guests in the audience. So we actually wanted to invite them to say a few words just to kick this off.
So just hold, if you got your hand up, just hold for just 1 second. We've got Wendy Warnick, who was the executive director for ARCUS from 1992 to 2009, and oversaw the early days of ARCUS receiving our first cooperative agreement funding from NSF. She is with us today, and we'd love to invite her to just say a couple things about ARCUS, her experience, whatever she'll say. So Wendy, hopefully you're in the audience and we can invite you to speak.
I am here and I can speak. I don't have very much to add to this. Is a really helpful and informative presentation, and I appreciate it a lot. I want to thank you, Audrey, and all the staff and the board and community for making these incredibly difficult decisions and planning for what looks to be a really orderly transition that'll preserve a lot of the resources and networks. And I think, especially during the very, very difficult times of these past few years, that's laudable, and you're to be congratulated for that. I also want to say that for me, ARCUS was a tremendous opportunity to get to know and work with an amazing group of people, the ARCUS staff and the ARCUS board and community members. Just really amazing people. And I look back to that time with a lot of gratitude for all the help and support. I did want to mention one staff person, actually a couple of staff people that you didn't mention who tend to be kind of invisible, but are incredibly important for making all of this possible. And one is Zeb Pauley, who supported the ARCUS infrastructure and online presence in multiple ways for many years, I think starting in the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken, and has been a part of the transition and sunsetting process. And Ronnie Owens, who I think is online, was also a part of that largely invisible infrastructure that's so critically important. And my personal thanks, besides to members of the Arctic community that I see online who we worked with over the years, I see a lot of old timers and as well as people that I know but didn't work with directly. But I also wanted to thank Helen Wiggins personally for all the support that she provided me during the time that I was executive director and worked with her, as well as for her ongoing role with ARCUS after I retired from the position. So again, I don't have any inspiring words about how to carry on. I know these times are, we've gone through difficult times in the past, but I think what's happening now is unprecedented. And I hope there's a way to continue the work that ARCUS has done and to keep this amazing community moving forward as much as possible. But I think with that, I'll close my remarks and just thank everyone for being here and being online.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to speak today, and thank you for your service to ARCUS. We would certainly not be here today without you. And it's wonderful that you mentioned Helen Wiggins because we'd also like to invite her to speak. Helen was program staff, as Wendy mentioned, since the early 2000s. Then she was ARCUS Director of Programs for many years. And then finally, she was the Executive Director from 2019 to 2024. And she is also serving a very short stint on the board now as we sunset the organization. And I'm very grateful for her leadership, her support, and her incredible knowledge of ARCUS through the years. So Helen, I'll invite you to jump on and thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And I'm trying to get my emotions together. So I gave myself a 50-50 chance of crying and breaking down. And Wendy, it's so good to see you. Wendy hired me way back in the olden times. And I remember the interview process. And after some very creative interview questions, thinking, this is someone I want to work for. It was about if you were stranded on a desert island but with a bunch of strangers, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I'm an introvert, so I would like hide behind a tree and watch people for a while, and then maybe start gathering skill sets together. And so I have very fond memories of those early days. But just to keep it really short, is, when I first kind of reflecting on ARCUS accomplishments and legacy, things come to mind like a high standard of excellence and like just an amazing level of professionalism. all the impacts of what we've done for Arctic Research and Education and the reports and meetings and collaborations and committees and recommendations and moving programs forward and connecting people. But I think as others mentioned, it's really about the people. It's about the focus that I think we've had on authentic connections to each other, working together, supporting each other, caring about each other as people. Sorry. And that's going to impact me forever. And I'm so grateful for all of you, the staff, the board, the funders, the volunteers, even people. If you opened up one email, then you're part of this community and you contributed to what we did. So I think that's a lasting legacy way past when web pages go down and reports get dusty. And I just want all of us to be really proud of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. And of course, now you're going to make me emotional, which is just not what we need is an emotion chain here. Um, Thank you for your remarks, and thank you again, Helen and Wendy, for joining us. And now I want to open it up to the rest of you. I apologize, those of you that had your hands up right when we started. Please consider asking your question or providing your comment again now. And I'll just open it up for anybody to share or promote an idea or whatever it is you'd like to do. The floor is yours. It looks like we might, Larry's got a hand up right off the bat. So Larry, please go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks very much for a great discussion. Thanks very much for everything that ARCUS has done over the years. And that I started doing Arctic research in 1981, and so I very clearly remember when ARCUS was initiated. And really, in those days, in the early days, anything we did in Arctic research had to be justified from the importance of why the Arctic was important to the lower 48. And I think ARCUS really helped us change that perception and made the Arctic important in its own right, and really helped establish collaborations across the nation and around the world, international partnerships. And so Arctic Info had a tremendous impact in that regard. And so I guess I just can't emphasize enough what an impact that ARCUS has had to the Arctic research community over the years, and actually to communities in the Arctic. I think that emphasis that ARCUS has helped establish and promote all these years has been tremendously important, and I'm eternally grateful. So one thing I just wanted to mention really quickly at the start of this conversation was that I really do believe that ARCUS needs more of a tribute than this short webinar can offer. And so I would really be pleased to help organize and execute some kind of celebration or tribute during the AGU this autumn. It will take some funds to do that. So I would call upon the ARCUS member organizations to help contribute to that, and we'll try and pull something together. So we'll extend some type of invitation to everybody and hope that people can participate at AGU in this autumn. And I welcome suggestions on how to do that. So if there are suggestions or offers of help, please shoot me a note. I think you all know how to find me. So thanks for everything you've done.
Thank you, Larry. That's wonderful and a wonderful invitation. And just scanning through the chat, it looks like Michael Walsh also expressed interest in supporting the drafting of an article on ARCUS legacy and impact. So that's at least one one possible collaborator. So if anybody else wants to jump on that, please feel free to stick something in the chat, or the staff are happy to help make those connections before we sunset.
Looks like Sarah has her hand raised.
Hi there. I want to say something on behalf of being a Polar Trek alumni. I think I saw some names on here who are Polar Trek alumni that are participating at maybe, I don't know, raise your hand so you show up in the list at the top of the list for everybody. So I can only speak by myself, but I think I have some pretty shared universal thoughts about polar treks, how it has changed my life at a deep, deep, deep down way. And then on top of that, so there's Elaine, we together, we were part of the last polar trek cohort, and it changes our lives. And it not just changed our lives, but it'll continue to change the lives of every student, formal classroom, non-formal classroom, people that we work with for the rest of our careers. And we're not, Elaine and I aren't, we got a lot of career left. We're not old. And there's so many of us, and we're all over the country. And some people have moved all over the world. And not only are they affecting the lives of students, they're affecting lives of communities, climate solutions, so many things because of ARCUS and because of Janet Warburton, whose name has not been said yet. And I wouldn't be who I am today without that program. And there's not a lot of things like that I can attribute to. And there's not enough words to say how grateful I am for that. And I have a feeling I'm saying things that resonate with a lot of Polar Trek alumni. So that program has changed the world. And I feel so grateful for that opportunity, even though we never got to do training in person because we were part of the COVID 2020 version of Polar Trek. And we had to build community on our own along the years. And so Elaine and I finally met at an STA conference like 2 years ago. And so the other piece I wanted so that's the big shout out to Janet's leadership and all the other people that she had on her team to make all of that possible over so many iterations and years, but also having the good fortune in my world to continue to do Arctic things with the International Arctic Buoy Program that started with Polar Trek. And I've never been so proud to say that there's this organization out there that has pushed me to learn and to practice what it means to drop into villages in Alaska in a much more responsible, kind, considerate way than I probably would have thought of some of that because of my background. But to make that formalized and like expected and just normalized of like and challenged and make it like we're never going to get it right, but we can keep trying. And we can keep trying our best, and we can keep trying and keep making mistakes and keep trying and keep building relationships. And that's transferable to so many different things in my life. And I bring it up just in the last year, or in the last 6 months, I've talked about this in context of other things. And that it seems to be a little bit different than what I've seen in other Arctic work groups and teams and programs. And it's priceless because it's based in relationship and trust. And I don't know what else nothing else is gonna help us move forward besides relationships and trust. So I just am forever grateful. And also, it's another thing that's been canceled in my life. And that's just pretty heartbreaking. So thanks for letting me talk. And thanks, Elaine, for raising your hand and showing up. There's Diane Hirschberg as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Can I add on to what Sarah said real quick? I can't say more about what Sarah said other than, ARCUS did professionally affect my career. I started as a marine biologist, applied to Polar Trek thinking I'd go underwater, got sent to do space science at the South Pole. Oh, I have my little flag and my penguins over here, but now I work for a space museum. So doing science education. So it really did change my professional career. And then just as a lighthearted side note, while I was at the South Pole, I met my fiance and we're getting married in January. So ARCUS really did change my life. And you always will have my gratitude for allowing that to happen. And yeah, I share the same sentiment that I hope science funding and science education and awareness, communication, all those wonderful things that ARCUS did and Polar Trek did. I hope we can continue those in other ways. I'll be trying to do it over here from my little corner of the world, but I'm happy to support where I can in future initiatives. So thank you to Polar Trek and everyone who supported that. And thanks for Sarah for summing up more eloquently how much this program has meant to all of us.
Thank you, Elaine. Diane, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, definitely. So I, of course, have a long relationship with Arcus. Really goes back probably just about when I started in Alaska over 20 years ago. Um, from I think coming up and meeting people at conferences in Fairbanks. And as I said, then my husband being a polar trek participant, which really was transformative for him as a science teacher. But also, back when Arcus had funding for bringing scholars, visiting scholars to Alaska, I brought a woman named Avia Yelunya, who I had met when I'd gone to Greenland. And that visit, I was able to take her up to Ukjavik. I was able to send her with a friend who many of you know, Panichach Agatha John Shields, to Bethel. And she spoke at AFN and Youth and Elders and in many other places. Her relationship now in Alaska, she's been here multiple times. She's been part of Indigenous education transformation conversations. There are now people she worked with at First Alaskans that are doing visiting lecturers in Greenland. So I mean, the Arctic is about our connections, and ARCUS enabled us to make those connections that had very profound impacts that I again last for decades and beyond. Um, and of course, I was one of the lucky people to serve on the board and be a part of getting to see firsthand the breadth of the impact and the meaning of the impact. And and so in the thinking about how we continue to honor and build on the legacy, a couple of pieces. So I now have a role as VP academic for UArctic, and um, not everybody who's an ARCUS is part of a UArctic institution, but like ARCUS, UArctic is very welcoming for people from any space who want to engage with us. And we do have an informal North American caucus right now. So that is also our way of continuing our conversations with our Canadian colleagues when that is becoming difficult in more formal settings. We are looking at also potentially creating a regional hub for UArctic specific to the US. And so I'll put my email, if anybody's interested, I can put it in the chat, and I would be happy to talk with you more about that. The other piece for those of us in social sciences who don't go to AGU, other than when ARCUS, and when I had a reason to be there with ARCUS, UArctic Congress every 2 years is not just cross-national, but it's also very cross-disciplinary. And we will likely have a North American caucus side gathering while we are in the Faroe Islands. The call for abstracts for the UArctic Congress will come out October 1st, so we'll make sure it's on that anybody who's part of Arctic Info or on these lists get that information. There will likely be support again for early career scholars and Indigenous scholars. So we would love to see you all with us in the Faroe Islands, but also if there's a way UArctic can support some of you in continuing these linkages, please reach out to me.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Diane.
I see Hayo's hand.
Hey, thank you, Audrey, in particular, for taking ARCUS through this part of their trajectory. But it's great to see Wendy. Thank you, Helen, in particular. Good to see Brit, Lisa, Janet, Betsy. I just wanted to reflect on two things because I do feel that ARCUS has modeled how you can get this done. And there's enough of that that's now part of our muscle memory that I think is going to help us down the line. So just reflecting on two things that I'm very much grateful for that ARCUS has been able to provide. One is when I came to the US in '98 from Germany, of course, you're intimidated. US Arctic research community is huge. How do you connect with people? ARCUS was like instant network, and in the greatest of ways, really able to appreciate, as somebody who started out then, just how collaborative the Arctic research community was, but the glue and sort of the electricity that kept all of that exciting, ARCUS was essential to that. So preserving that, I think, is important. The other piece that I'm very grateful for to ARCUS in terms of the important services you've provided is when I was asked to chair the Science Steering Committee for the study of Arctic change in 2009, 2010, I think it was. That was like, I don't know whether I want to do that, but then you have ARCUS as an amazing foundation and supporting organization where immediately sort of this whole cloud of worries that you might have, how am I going to help organize this or that? And a reminder for those of us who were in those days back then, the philosophy was that, NSF saw themselves as a very supportive but antagonistically supportive funding agency. So this was not an easy terrain to navigate. And ARCUS was just outstanding in that context. So I very much appreciate all that you've done, that you're doing now, and thanks again.
Thank you, Hayo.
Thank you, Hayo. We appreciate your reflections. We appreciate what everyone is saying, both verbally and in the chat. It's really, really heartwarming. Is there anyone else who wants to share a reflection or a path forward for the community?
I see Jerry's hand raised.
Great, go ahead, Jerry.
It looks like you might still be muted if you're speaking.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
You sound good now.
I'm one of the artifacts of the ARCUS as well as computer technology. So I appreciate everything that's been said, and particularly special words to both Audrey and Brit for seeing this sunset period to a successful conclusion. I also certainly like to appreciate having seen both Helen and Wendy reminiscing for some of the early days. I had the good fortune of being an NSF in the mid 80s when ARCUS had its beginning, and not many folks on the conference here doesn't realize that there was a lot going on in the mid to late 80s that really laid the foundation for ARCUS, including a small grant that facilitated some of the early activities. Two names that have not been mentioned, and it probably goes beyond the memory of anyone online here, although there are some 80s people kicking around here. ARCUS it had its first breath at Instar in Boulder with Brit Myers. Many folks won't know that. We also had a major conference at UCAR on Arctic interactions in January of '87. All of that ended up pointing to the University of Alaska as a lead organization. And it was Luis Perenza, who was vice chancellor at the time, and Laura Lee McCarley, who was the first director, I think, of ARCUS, who were very proactive in at NSF, getting NSF on board for the beginning of ARCUS. Without that leadership at the University of Alaska, the ARCUS would not have gotten off the ground. And I think it's really appropriate to recognize those folks. There was also a journal that we started in the 80s that was called the Arctic Research of the United States. It had about a 20-year shelf life. And in the fall 91 issue, I would recommend folks reading it. Laura Lee wrote a rather major article on Arctic syzygism about the consortium. And it's really a very, inspiring document. All of this hopefully will be unraveled when we get together at AGU and start thinking about the legacy in a more formal way. So with that, I'll just thank everyone, the current staff, the past board members, all the institutional members for everything they've done over the years. And I hope that there will be some fruitful follow-up as to the next generation of ARCUS. ARCUS isn't going to go away. There's going to be a follow-up. Where that arises remains to be seen. But in any event, we look forward to the AGU session and certainly the formal preparation of the history of ARCUS. The web, your archiving will certainly be very helpful, but there needs to be a formal document on the history, starting in the 80s when things were really blooming at NSF in terms of international and global change activities. And ARCUS played a major role in those early days. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you for your support of ARCUS way back in the beginning. We obviously wouldn't be here without that, so thank you for your support and for being part of the call today. Is there any other comments that folks want to share? We didn't know exactly how much time we should allot for this meeting, so we gave ourselves plenty of time, but we don't need to keep people past when folks are commenting, so feel free to jump on if you have something to say. Don't be shy. Lots of inspiring comments in the chat also, so thank you, those of you that have put some comments there. It'll be wonderful to go back and read the chat transcript in more detail. It's hard to keep up with both, but thank you, all of you, for your participation and support, and certainly the time and energy that folks have put into ARCUS activities and programs over the years. It's made the difference. Okay, well, seeing no more questions or comments or reflections, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We so appreciate all of you being here today. Again, thank you for listening to what we had to say in this farewell moment, and definitely reach out to staff, either myself or Brit, if you would like to join the effort to write up something about ARCUS legacy and history. It sounds like that is growing some legs, and I'd love to see that continue, and I would plan to participate as well. So please feel free to reach out if you'd like to know how to get connected with that effort. And otherwise, as I said before, please stay connected, stay in touch, stay collaborative, and best of luck to all of you as you go forward in the Arctic research and education world. And keep an eye out for Connect the Arctic. We hope to see that continue as well. So do good work, stay in touch, and thank you again.
Bye, everybody.